No, you have to be Julia. Julia, get back here. Julia. There's Julia. Hello, everybody. Julia is back. I know that a lot of you are bummed that you haven't seen her in a few weeks, but Julia's been busy. Julia's got better things to do than to hang around with us fly tires.
So, I love you guys. I missed everybody.
Julia's been busy, but Julia's back. Julia has to leave at about 4:30 today. So we're going to have Tanner. Tanner is going to be reading the questions or helping out, posting links when needed. So we have a team of three, and Phil Monahan is lurking in the background somewhere. I see Ted Putnam's on. Ted, this fly is way too small for anything that you're going to be doing. And it looks like we got people coming in. Bill, Roger, Dan, Larry. Oh, they're coming in too fast. I can't keep track of them now. Well, welcome everybody to Fly Tying Tuesday, and a little bit late. Apologize for the change in time. Had a little bit of a schedule conflict this week, so we're tying on Tuesday at 4 instead of Monday at 3. And we are going to, oh, by the way, I know what we're going to tie in the tie-off, which is next Wednesday at 3. And we're going to tie the Henryville Special, which is a nasty fly. So it should be, Flagler and I should have a lot of fun with that. Not an easy fly at all. So that'll be next Wednesday at 3 p.m. But today we're going to tie the Phlamin Pheasant tail. And I don't know a lot about the Phlamin Pheasant tail. It was developed by a guy named Tim Jenkins. But it is a great fly for early season. It's a really good imitation of a beta nymph or the little blue-wing olives that you see early in the season. And I also think it's a really good imitation of the small black stoneflies that hatch really all winter long, but you see them get even more abundant in March and April. So it's a good small dark nymph for fishing early in the season. This is a nymph that if you want to get it deep, you're either going to have to use split shot, or you're going to have to hang it off a big heavy nymph of some other variety, like a big hare's ear, a mop fly, or whatever, big stone fly. This fly is not weighted. It's got a glass bead on it, which helps it sink a little bit, but it doesn't have a weighted body, and it doesn't use a metal bead. So it's not going to sink that well. So you're going to have to use something else if you fish it near the bottom, unless you're fishing very shallow water. This is also a small fly, and it's a relatively complicated fly for such a small fly. And I'm warning you that it's a tough one. In this size, it's tough. I struggled with this fly practicing it, and hopefully I can get through it, and I can get in behind the camera well enough to tie it. But I'm tying it on a size 16 Orvis wide gap tactical nymph hook, which is a short shank barbless wide gap hook. And the size 16 is really a size 18 fly, because it's a shorter shank hook. So what you get on this is you get the gap of a size 16 fly. You get a pretty good gap, but you get the length of a size 18. So it'll hold a little bit better. These hooks hold really, really well, even though they're barbless. They hold really, really well. And again, it's not easy. It's not an easy fly. So if you're tying along, good luck. because I've had some problems with it. And we should talk a little bit about tying small flies. Tying small flies is just a matter of good light and good glasses, good magnification. That's all it is. Any of you, I am not that nimble fingered. I am not that coordinated. And I can tie a fly this small with a little bit of practice, but I got to have a lot of light and I got to have a pair of close-up glasses. Then once you do that, don't be afraid of small flies. If you got the good light and you got good glasses or magnifying glasses, or you're tying in front of a magnifier, you're going to be fine. Just take your time. The other thing, the other tip to tying a small nymph like this is to use 12-0 thread. If you use a heavier thread like 8-0 or 6-0, you're going to run into trouble. It's going to get too bulky, and you're going to, particularly toward the head, you're going to run into trouble. So 12-0 fly, 12-0 thread. If you don't have 12-0 today, tie along with whatever you have. But I think you're going to find it a lot easier with that finer thread. Okay. Any questions before we start? Doesn't look like it. We've posted the pattern. If you have questions, just scroll up in the comments, and you can see what we're using for materials. But I'm going to start out, and the first thing we need is a hook, obviously. So I'm going to take this fly out of here and put a hook in there. And one of the hardest parts, they're all hard parts in this fly, but I find it very tough to get these little tiny glass beads on the hook. So what I would do is start with the hook with the point kind of up like this. This is going to make it easier for you to get that little glass bead on the hook. And then we're going to go and we're going to pick a, oh, I forgot my glass beads. Got to go get them. You can buy these from a fly tying supply place, or you can buy them in a craft store. They're just little glass beads with a silver center inside them, inside the hole. And they're really tough to work with because they're so small. So what I've done, you can grab one with a pair of forceps or something. But what I've done is I've taken a piece of this double back nano tape. It's kind of it's double-sided, but I didn't remove the paper from the back of it. So it's only sticky on one side. And I put a bunch of beads on here. I just, grab a bead with, you can use forceps too. Grab a bead and I put it on the sticky tape until the whole side's facing me. And then I just press it in there. And then I'll show you how I get these beads on the hook. And I'm going to switch glasses right now, too, to my closer glasses. So now I've got these beads on this piece of sticky double back, or single back, actually. And what you can do is just press the bead onto the hook. Like so. Now you can do the same thing with your fingers, but believe me, these little glass beads are going to go all over the place. You're going to lose a whole bunch of them, and you can't pick them up with a magnet on the floor because they're not metallic. But you can use you can grab one with a pair of forceps too, or whatever. But if you try to do it with your fingers, it's going to be tough. And then I take the hook out of the vise and just slide the bead up and place it back in the vise. Like so. Now it's on there. You can put a drop of super glue or whatever on here if you want. It's going to be plenty jammed in there when we get done, but sometimes it'll move back and forth on the hook shank and drive you crazy. So if you want to put a little drop of glue there, that's fine. You don't have to. You probably want to point your hook down a little bit. That'll keep the bead from sliding back. And then you start your thread behind the bead, and building up a little bit of thread there will help somewhat to keep it from sliding, although it still will slide. And then cut your thread. And notice that 12-0 thread, it's not building up anything. And then you're going to want to go all the way back around the bend. So you're going to take your thread, see how that bead's moving around there. Going to take your thread all the way back and come around the bend, maybe about halfway down, a third to a halfway down, like so. So you're going to come down a little further on the bend than you normally would. This is going to give that fly a curved shape in the end. Now we're going to take a black pheasant tail. You could tie this in any color, but this one is tied in black. And I'm going to take, I don't know, I'm going to take about 5 or 6 fibers. And when you cut this from the stem, make sure that, having trouble getting in here with the camera, make sure that you cut it very close to the stem, like so, because you're going to need all that length to help you wind that pheasant tail. It's going to make it a lot easier. So I got, how many have I got here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh, I got like 10 of them. That's okay. Anywhere from 6 to 10. And then you want the tails to be short on this, so like a half a shank length. I don't like long tails on this fly. And then you're just going to capture all those little guys on top of the hook shank. Put your finger on the far side of the hook when you tighten. And if they're too long, I think those are too long, at this point you can just pull them up a little bit. So you've got those attached. Take a couple more tight turns. Go forward a little bit just to secure those. And that's going to be your body too. So we're going to kind of just push those out of the way for a minute. And then you're going to take a single strand of Flashaboo or Krystal Flash. You could use Flashaboo, Krystal Flash. For this fly, I like the Midge Krystal Flash because it's really fine. You could also use fine wire here, really fine wire if you wanted to. But I'm just going to cut a single strand of this. Anything sparkly, will work. But the pattern calls for a single strand of Flashaboo. Now I'm tying this fly different, I noticed, than Tim Jenkins ties it. Tim builds up a body of Krystal Flash, and then he winds a single, and then he puts super glue on it, and he winds a single strand of pheasant tail through that. I'm going to tie this a little bit more traditionally. I'm not going to quite tie it the way he does it. So I'm going to go up to the bead and then just catch my piece of Krystal Flash in there. And then you can pull it so you don't have to trim it off in the end. And then secure it. Bring the thread back. And this is a tricky part here because you do want to wind back over that pheasant tail a little bit so that it starts over the bend, like so. And that Krystal Flash will get caught in everything. It's a pain in the butt. Try to keep that Krystal Flash off to the side if you can. And then advance your thread just a couple turns, and you're going to take your first wrap of pheasant tail, and I would twist these in your fingers or a pair of hackle pliers and try to keep that tinsel out of the way and take turn. Yeah, you can see how that gets. Take a turn behind that rib and then start going forward. Get that rib out of there. Give this a little twist. I probably should have used hackle pliers. And that thread hanging there will keep the pheasant tail fibers from separating. It'll hold them in place. So go up about half to 3/4 of the way and secure it with 2 or 3 turns. And then at this point, I would just cut this off, not too short. Leave a little stub there that you'll bind that down later. So not a big deal. When you start winding over the thorax, you'll cover that up. And then take your rib, and you can counter rib it if you want, which is winding it toward you. Or you can wind it away. I don't think it matters that much. But you're just getting that little sparkle in the body. And tie that off. Like so. Trim the end. Now, the wing case on this is a little piece of thin skin, black thin skin. And I like it to be fairly narrow. Otherwise, you're going to build up too much bulk. I would say about half a hook gap. So let's go over it to the vise and look at it. So, somewhere around half a hook gap or even less. Fairly thin strip of thin skin. You could use you could use a black feather here. You could use somebody suggested in another session black electrical tape, which will work. Just a little thin piece of it. And you're just going to tie this in right on top of the hook flat. Just kind of grab it and work it in place. You want it to be centered there. I'm going to pull it back a little bit so it doesn't go over that bead. And then secure that by winding forward. And now I've wound down the butts of those pieces of pheasant tail. So this is going to be pulled over the top for your wing case. Show you the way it looks there. Now that's the way it looks from the top. You could twitch it a little bit to get it centered. Make sure it's centered. And now you're going to come back to that black pheasant tail. And for the legs, I like to take fibers from the top because they're thinner, they're skinnier. And it looks a little bit more realistic and more like legs. And you want to grab somewhere between 6 and 8 of these fibers. What do I got here? I got enough there. And line them up. You line them up before you cut them by just going like this and seeing where they line up, at what angle to the stem they line up, and then cut them off or strip them. Just twitch them off the feather. No questions so far, Julia, Tanner?
No, we have some. I was just to pop in. Well, we just got one from William. We have a couple of them. But I wanted to make sure I was pronouncing it correctly because I should know this by now. But William said, how about a black biot? Biot? Biot. That's what I was going to say. But, I thought I was worried my Midwestern accent was going to butcher it. So
yes, biot. Okay. You could use a biot.
Okay.
I hate biots, especially on a small fly like this. I wouldn't use it, but yes, you could use a biot.
Okay, great. And then we had one other question I think I know what they're asking. They asked, can you use the same thread for flies as you wrap fishing rods?
No.
Okay. I didn't think so, but I wasn't sure. Okay.
Rod winding thread you could use for a really big streamer. It's G size thread.
Okay.
Which is bigger even than 3/0, or it's bigger than 240 denier, or even 280. It's a very thick thread. So it doesn't work well for tying flies, no, except very, very large flies.
Okay. And then
good question.
Yeah. And then Paul asked, have you ever tied it with a weighted bead?
No, because there may be something magical about that glass bead. It has that sparkle, and you're not going to get the same effect from a metal bead. So I have not tied it with the metal bead. No, you could if you wanted to.
Great. But those are all the questions for now.
Yeah, it's good to have some flies with glass beads. Sometimes they seem to work better for whatever reason.
All right, back to it.
All right. So I'm going to take the tips of these pheasant tails, and I want them to stick out beyond the bead about half a shank length. So just about that much, not very much. These little flies don't have very big legs. And I'm just going to carefully, with a loose turn of thread, come over the top of those and hold them there on top of the bead, and just try to keep them centered for now on top of the bead. And then wind back a couple turns. You're going to cut that off. Now, there's something you could do here if you wanted to. You could use the butt section of this pheasant tail to wind a thorax. You could just wind it back to the wing case and just wind it around like you wound the body. And I think if I were tying these myself, I probably would do it that way, but it's not what the pattern calls for. So I'm not going to do it that way. But you already got this nice piece of pheasant tail in place. Why not just wind it around there for a thorax? But again, the pattern calls for sparkle dubbing, so we're going to use sparkle dubbing. But that's another option. So I'm going to cut these off. leaving those legs sticking over the front. And then I'm going to grab some sparkly dubbing. In this case, I don't think that ice dub, which is what I usually use for sparkly dubbing, I don't think it would work well because it's a little coarse. So I would use maybe I think there's a ice hair dub, which is ice dubbing mixed with hare's ear, which might work. Or this is called SLF dubbing, which is a little bit finer than ice dub. And you want a kind of a dark olive color. And I'm going to take just a tiny pinch of this stuff. I don't need much at all. And I'm going to dub just a little tiny thorax. So I'm going to back up, and I'm going to.
Tom, we have a couple questions about the wing case or other ideas for the wing case.
Yeah.
So do you want to focus on that first? Oh, literally. There you go. Yeah.
I'm gonna angle this down a little bit too.
I'm not quite sure what Tom is asking, but I think there's a typo. But why not use that hit the wing case? That something wing case? I'm not sure what they're asking. But but Tom asked, how about using the butt of the legs for the wing case?
Yeah, you could do that too.
Okay.
Yep, you could absolutely do that.
Thomas, if you could just clarify what you mean, we can ask that again. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to dub just a little tiny amount of this, barely. I mean, it's barely there. And I might do maybe two finger lengths of that. I'm going to put a little bit more on. Sometimes with this stuff, it helps to wet your fingers. But you can see that's just a little bit of dubbing. Okay, so sparse amounts. That's the secret to dubbing, is just use small amounts and a lot of pressure. And when you do it that way, you don't need wax. All right, now I'm going to come back in closer.
Okay, Tom, we have a couple other questions.
Okay.
Ken's asking if you could use peacock curl for the thorax.
Yes, you could.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yep.
Great. And
again, I'm just sort of following the pattern as it was originated.
Looks great. And then Edward's asking, could you use raffia for the wing case?
I think raffia would be a little coarse. Might be tough to work with. You could try it.
Okay, got it. All right.
Yeah, maybe a thin piece of raffia would work. It would be a little harder to tie off, but yeah, maybe raffia would work. Synthetic raffia, I think. Okay. So now I'm just gonna wind this thorax, starting right up against the wing case. And then I'm going to come forward right here. So there's my thorax. And then you want to kind of get around to the front of your fly and just separate these legs. Kind of push them out of the way so that there's about half on one side and half on the other. Sometimes you have to fiddle with them a little bit. Pinch them a little bit. And you know what? If you got a stray one that just doesn't want to behave, cut it off. Get rid of it. Okay, so those are pretty well distributed on both sides. And then you want to bring that wing case forward, and at the same time, just sweep those legs back. So what I'm doing is pulling it forward and sweeping those legs back so that the wing case will push those back along the body. And then bring your thread up right behind the bead and in front of the legs, and raise the wing case material a little bit. Make sure your legs are in place, and then give it a good pull to tighten. Give it a couple really good hard turns. And you notice I bound down one of the legs, no big deal. That's why I started with more than I needed. And now you've got your little legs on both sides of the fly, just like a mayfly or a stonefly. And grab that piece of wing case, just pull it back and lock it down. Got a little piece sticking up there. I'm gonna trim it off. Not that it's gonna show. And then whip finish. Just, you only need about 3 turns here because you're gonna put some epoxy on top of that. Cut your thread. So, almost there. And then you're going to get some epoxy. UV cure epoxy or head cement if you'd like. This is a good place to use your epoxy though. And I like the thin for this. And you don't want to try to use the nozzle on a little tiny fly like this. So you want to take the top off your epoxy and dip your dubbing needle in there. And just get a little bit. You don't need much. I got way too much there. Need a little bit. And then come back to your fly and just coat the wing case. I had too much, but I got lucky. Make sure you get right over your thread wraps. Turn this a little bit so you can see it. And then hit it with your UV light. At a couple angles, nice and close. And you're done. So there is the, let me get a better angle. There's the Phlamin Pheasant. So a great imitation for those early season little black stoneflies or mayflies. Little sparkly wing case, a little red bead for a hot spot, and little filaments for gills on the
hey, Tom.
along the abdomen. Yes.
Hey, Julie had to leave, so I'm taking over. Hello, everybody. There's a couple questions for you.
Okay, I'm ready.
So, first question: would a small zip tie work for the wing case?
A small zip tie? No, it would be too heavy, and well, a piece of a small zip tie without the wire. I mean, you want to, yeah, just cut the plastic. Any thin black plastic would work. Since you're going to coat it with epoxy anyways. Thin skin's pretty easy to work with, and it's durable and it stretches. But I would think zip tie, just don't try to tie the wire in too.
Okay. And can you repeat the hook size?
Yes, size 16 Orvis tactical wide gape, which is really the shank length is about the same as a size 18. So it's a short shank.
Okay. And Bill is asking, how would you fish this fly, with a dropper or a drop fly or something else?
However I fish this fly, I would fish it dead drift, because these little critters don't swim very well, and the fish aren't used to seeing them darting through the water. So I know that Baetis nymphs or blue-winged olives are called swimming mayflies, but they don't swim very well. You could fish it on a dropper. You could fish it on a dry dropper. Personally, I would fish this behind a big heavy nymph like a stonefly or any bigger, like a size 14 tungsten headed nymph of some kind, whatever. And then I would tie a piece of 5X tippet, about 6 to 8 inches of 5X tippet, and I just tie that off the bend of the heavier fly. Or a split shot, or if you only want to fish one fly, or in some places it's legal. It's not legal to fish 2 flies or 3 flies. If you have to fish a single fly, then to get this down, you are going to need to put some weight on your leader, some split shot above a knot, or a big heavy nymph.
Joe is asking, would you fish this using fluorocarbon line?
I would. I prefer fluorocarbon for nymphs. Yeah, it sinks better than nylon, and so yes.
Tommy asks, what other color bead could you use?
Tommy, I would experiment. Oh, I mean, these little glass beads come in all different kinds of colors, and I would experiment. Obviously, the originator, Mr. Jenkins, probably tried various colors and found that red was the most effective, because that's what he puts on his pattern. But I would try green, yellow, black, purple. I don't know. That's something that you're going to have to experiment with.
And Thomas asks, will a scud hook work?
Yes. Yeah, a scud pupil hook would work very well. They're generally not barbless, but yeah, that would work. Any short shank wet fly hook. So yeah, scud pupil would work just fine. In fact, I think the original fly was tied on a scud hook. So yep, that would work just fine.
Okay. Those are all the questions we have so far. There's some praise for you tying a difficult fly today.
Well, I like to challenge myself, and I like to challenge you. I like to challenge the tires out there. You get scared of these flies, small flies or deer hair flies or whatever, and you find that once you tie a few of them, they're really not that bad. And there are very few flies that are super difficult to tie, other than the super realistic things that nobody would ever fish that look exactly like a butterfly or a praying mantis or something. But these flies that we use for fishing, they are none of them are very difficult to tie. Just a matter of a little practice.
Tom, Bill asks, was the original body tied in black?
I don't know. Don't know.
And we have another
Could you
question.
tie this with lead-free wire to get it to sync better? Robert, I don't know if you're going to be able to find lead-free wire that's fine enough to use on this small hook. I think you're going to have to. I think you're going to have to just use exterior weight to get this fly down. Is it easier to tie on the legs just before the wing case? Bruce, you could tie the legs on before the wing case or even after the wing case. Yeah, you could do that. You could absolutely do that. Just tie them along the sides of the body. 3 or 4 on each side. You could absolutely do it that way. Yep. I find this way to be just as easy as tying them separately along the sides, but yeah, you could do that. Any other questions? Maybe you could try extra small copper wire. Yep. You could try extra small copper wire for sure. And I do mean extra small because yeah, you could wind I mean, the original pheasant tail nymph was tied with a copper wire underbody. If your pheasant tail fibers are long enough, could you leave them as legs? The problem is, Ed, that you could, but they would be blunt. They wouldn't be small and tapered like the tails. So you only got, there's only tips at one end of a pheasant tail. So if you're tying in the thin end for tails, when you wind that forward, yeah, you could pull those back and make legs out of them, but they'd be kind of blunt and probably a little thick for this little tiny fly. So you could do it, yeah, but I wouldn't. Any other questions? Tanner, it looks like we may be out of questions.
I think so.
Okay. All right, everyone. Well, thank you for tuning in. Sorry about the time change. I hope this is convenient for some of you, and I hope you tied along. If you're new, welcome to our weekly fly tying session. We have a lot of fun here, and I see a lot of old friends and regular faces, and that's great to see as well. So. Next week is my tie-off against the great Tim Flagler, and we're tying the Henryville Special Dry Fly, which is a kind of a classic old caddis imitation. Still works quite well, but anyway, thank you for tuning in. And we don't have one next Monday, but we have one on Wednesday. So I will see you on Wednesday.